What's up, guys? Another week, another GT4 lap guide. So this week we're at MoSport. It'll be GT4 fixed and sports car challenge. I also believe that there's going to be a Falcon endurance race this upcoming weekend, so that should be a pretty good combo. Now, a couple tips and tricks before we dive into the lap guide. This place is very fast, very flowy. You really need to get these corners set up properly in advance and then get on that throttle early. We definitely want to drive this track pretty aggressively, so don't be afraid to really push and see where that grip is, especially on track exit. Play around with it, see what you can get away with, what you can't. Now jumping right into it, as we come across the start-finish line, we're going to come all the way up to turn 1. Oop, passed it just a little bit here. So this first dirt patch to our left-hand side is going to be our brake and turn-in marker. Now we want to come in, we want to carry as much speed as possible through here. This is a really long corner, so we can carry quite a bit here. Once we're coming up to it, we're going to use about 25-30% pressure, so light to medium pressure, and we'll start our turn in. Now, you might not be able to see it with your graphics settings, but we can see somewhat of that dark patch where all the tire scrubbing has already happened on the track surface. We kind of want to try to follow this. Now, as we're going through the corner, obviously we're going to bleed off that brake pressure. And once we're somewhat creeping up to our curbing here, that's going to be our reference for getting back on throttle. Now, the caveat to that is where you're apexing. So turn 1 needs a very late apex because it's a downhill with just a little bit of camber, not too much. We want to make sure that we're getting a later apex. If we try to apex in the middle of the corner, as we start to build that throttle back up, the car's going to want to fall away and drop off to the left-hand side before we want to start tracking out. So we're going to get a late apex towards the very end of our pit wall. We want to make sure we're straddling this curbing here. You can't get any slowdowns or off tracks going too far to the right. And to be honest, it's really difficult to go too far to hit the wall, so there's not too much of a concern there. Now in this lap, I did not straddle this as much as I could have, so that's something to keep in mind. Like I said, play around with that. Really feel out how much you can get away with and take advantage through there. We're going to track all the way out to the curbing here on the left-hand side. Now, an important thing to note for our endurance races next weekend, or even if you find yourself leaving the pits during any of the sprint races, the pit exit winds up coming out right on the actual line of the track. So we're going to see my car move all the way over to the right-hand side here. It's very easy for two cars to collect each other if somebody's exiting the pits. So keep an eye on who's in the pit lane, who's exiting, where everybody's at. Definitely not a pretty sight when two cars get collected here. Now coming up to our next corner, we want to make sure we're using all of the track surface on our right-hand side here. There were even times where I'm dipping tires into the grass ever so slightly. This gets a little dangerous because if the car does lock that right rear tire up, you can go into quite the spin coming down the hill. But we're going to use all of that track surface on the right hand side. We want to get the car pointed in early. Now there's not a whole lot of references here for where you want to apex. This is a very blind corner. A lot of the corners here are. So if we back up just a little bit, as we're cresting the hill, once we reach about the top of it is when we want to make sure we're really starting to turn in. So right here, you can see my car's pointed just to the right-hand side of this white line on the left-hand side of the track. If we take a look at cockpit, so the car is pointed more or less actually toward right at the end of this fence line. Now as we start to get further and further into the corner, we want to make sure the car is getting pointed more and more left. Now something we can do while we're in our turn is we can use these two trees here. These two stand out quite a bit to the rest of the forest, if you will. So if we can get our car pointed here before we start coming into the downhill section, that'll put you into a pretty good position. Now again, we're going to use pretty light brake pressure here, and we're going to treat this corner as a double apex. So we want to get all the way up against the left-hand side, and as we crest this almost secondary hill, you'll kind of feel it. So you'll be braking. Once you release, we can see, boom, right there, the car kind of hops, gets down onto the hill, and once that suspension compresses, we can get on throttle. We can honestly start to build that throttle back up even before you start to, before that car starts to, its weight comes back down onto the suspension. We're going to track out just a little bit, and then we'll make our second apex here on the left. Track all the way out to the right-hand side. Now this corner is especially difficult to pick a braking zone and align. Now something I'm using is this billboard here on the left-hand side. As this passes my peripheral vision, I start to apply the brakes. So as soon as that leaves my line of sight past the A-pillar or the roll cage itself, I'm starting to build that brake pressure up. Want to brake in a straight line, we're using about medium, a little bit higher than medium brake pressure. And something I've found is we have this little lane in the track itself. Now what we can do is try to straddle this this seam for the lane. That'll help kind of guide us through the corner here. We're going to get into about a middle of the corner apex. The elevation here is a little funky, so as we're coming into the corner, we're actually traveling uphill a little bit, so you can release that brake pressure pretty early and the car will still grip up. So if we watch our brake pressure here, a pretty rapid release just to a trail braking state, and the tail lights are the brake lights aren't even actually on for the car itself, so it does not take very much brake pressure here at all. Once we kiss the curb, we can start to build back up to 100% throttle. And once again, like I said with that lane, we can follow it all the way through the corner. Once we get past it, there's plenty of room on track out for you to just be flat out. Now, everybody's favorite, another blind corner. As we come up to the Continental Bridge, because this is blind, there's not going to be a whole lot of references here. The best thing to do is you're really just going to have to figure out a good timing on your own end. It was a distance thing for me, so as I'm in the cockpit, so I'm starting to turn. So about here, you know, the steering wheel is straight, and I just ever so slightly start to turn the car in. So it's a distance for me from where my car is in relation to the actual bridge itself. I would guess anywhere between 4 to 5 car lengths. Now, the trick to this corner is to be flat out all the way through until you get to the bottom of the hill. So if you're not flat out, let's put this another way. If you're flat out here and you wind up tracking too far to the right-hand side, or you even touch the grass, you turned in too late. And if you're flat out and you of course are touching this little gutter here on the left-hand side, then you turned in too early. So you have to play around with that a little bit. What you can do is start dipping your tires in the grass to leave yourself a marker. So one lap, dip your tire in, see where the car goes on exit. If it goes too far to the right-hand side, so you turned in too late, you want to get that car turned in before your previous tire dip into the grass, and vice versa. If you're touching that little gutter on the left-hand side, you're turning in too early, you want to make sure that you start turning in after that tire dip in the grass. So that way we're kind of making our own references to use to judge off of until we can start really nailing this corner. Now something else during your sight laps especially. I was giving myself quite a few confidence lifts coming into the corner just to make sure the car was kind of going where I wanted it to. I wasn't overcommitting to the corner. Now, something else to note, this gutter is not going to be useful for us. If you get your left side tires in here, the car does want to start jumping around quite a bit. So right there is about the maximum, and even then you can see my car wiggling around a little bit too much. Now once we get through the corner and we start to come into the bottom of this compression zone, we want to make sure that we're lifting, so we'll keep an eye on the throttle here. We lift off, give ourselves just a little bit of breathing room before we start getting on the brakes very heavy. This is going to be one of those exceptions where we can build a lot of brake pressure here. Because the car is coming downhill and we go into a compression zone, there's a ton of mechanical grip and it's forcing the tires down into the ground. So we can use a lot of brake pressure here without engaging too much ABS. Now our next turns, 4 and 5, these are going to be a double apex turns as well. So we're going to apex here, and it's a little tricky because unfortunately once again it is blind, and on entry it is uphill. So we can, with that being said, we can get on the brakes pretty late coming into this first right-hander. We want to let the car track out. Now if you're getting all the way to the curbing, that can work. What I was finding during my sight laps, if I got all the way out here, then I started to scrub a lot of front tire, and then I'd start understeering the second half of this double apex. So this was the ideal line for myself. Play around with it. If you're getting all the way out here and understeering, definitely dial it back, scrub a little bit more speed off through that first right-hander, and make sure we're taking a nice gentle arc here. Now we do want to get a late apex for the second right-hander, so that will determine somewhat how much speed and where we're tracking out from our first one. The reason why this is important, this curb eats cars. This thing is huge, so if you do hit this, it's going to jump the car pretty high into the air. It's going to delay rotation, and it might even unsettle it enough to go spinning out on exit. So we can nick just the corner of it, but if we're hitting this curb dead on with a tire, it's going to cause quite a few issues. Now the other thing to mention is on track out here, I do get away with using this extra bit of surface on exit. What can happen is this will unsettle the car quite a bit as well, especially if we still have the steering cranked a little bit to the left to catch an oversteer moment. So keep that in mind as well. Now this is the best straight on the whole at the whole track. There's going to be a lot of drafting going on here, and it actually leads into a little bit of a sketchy corner to go too wide in. Now as we come over that little hill, we want to make sure that our car is set up early for this next right-hander. So you'll notice I get the car turned towards the right before I started getting onto the brakes. We want to drive a little bit of the middle of the track here. If we open it up too much, we're adding too much distance. And if we try to double apex it, that does work out great in a defense scenario. It's fast and repeatable as well. But this middle of the line is the ideal line as far as distance and carrying speed into the corner. Now we're going to downshift 2 times from 6th into 4th gear. Again, making sure that we get early rotation. And this corner in particular has quite a bit of grip through here. So you can get on the throttle very early. You can get on it aggressively and not have to worry too much about tracking out. I really encourage you guys to dial in a ton of steering angle here just to see what the car does. You'll be surprised at how well it responds to some of that. Now, not the greatest line from my part. I would have liked to have tucked a little bit farther into the curbing here on the right-hand side. And that's only to help open up this next left-hander. But we're going to get on the brakes early, get the car slowed, and then we're going to utilize a downshift a little bit later into the turn-in process or the entry of the corner just to help with that rotation. Get up against the left-hand side curbing and make sure we're not tracking out too much here. Middle of the track is absolutely the farthest out we want to go. Ideally, you want to be about a car length or car width, excuse me, off the left-hand side of the track. This is going to get the car set up early and open the corner up as wide as possible for this last right-hander. And again, we can follow this lane through the corner. Now, I was finding that if I held onto the curbing here a little bit longer than what felt natural, my exits were a lot better. I think it's a little bit of an increasing radius on exit here. So if you get right up to the curb, start building throttle back up. So if we were to leave a little bit sooner than that and start building our throttle back up, I was finding myself into the grass here on exit quite a bit. So try to hold on to that curbing and make sure that you have a fairly straight steering wheel on exit. So we can see I catch just a little bit of oversteer there. So still not quite perfected, but pretty close. And that's going to be our lap guide around MoSport. Like I said, it's definitely a very fun track. There's not a lot of passing opportunities here. So as always, make sure you're really performing in qualifying. Get those qualifying laps and practice reps in. So, go into a practice session, do your out lap, do 2 flyers, and then reset the car. And that's really just to get you into the zone mentally and get those reps in. So that way, when real qualifying comes around, you don't feel that pressure to perform. You've already done it. You already know what it feels like. You're going to be good to go. Otherwise, as always, if anybody has any questions, feel free to leave a comment. And good luck in officials.